Hi everyone, Ali here from Dental Medical Counsel. I want to thank the San Mateo Dental Society for setting this up for us. We're going to talk about how to purchase a dental practice. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID and get an update. Jim and Nikia asked me to kind of just jump right in so that we have as much time as possible. A lot of you are still trickling in, as I see, so we're just going to jump right into it. So tonight is really about two big topics. One, we're going to definitely talk about how to purchase a practice, how to sell a practice. We're going to go into those nitty-gritty aspects of it, and a lot has changed because of COVID, believe it or not. And so we're going to go through that. I'm going to give you the state of the economy right now and what people are doing, and more importantly, what you can do if you're ready to sell your practice or if you're ready to buy a practice. We're going to talk about, whether this is a good time, whether it's not a good time, and then what things to watch out for. But we're going to also talk about what's probably on a lot of your minds, which is this, what to do about COVID and how to handle that. And we're going to talk a little bit about those details, because those details, those little things that we're going to talk about are the reasons why we are seeing some practices really thrive, believe it or not, if you can say that, during this kind of COVID world, and some practices not as much, and struggle through things, and they're having a lot more employee issues, they're having a lot more patient issues, business issues as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And so we're going to go into those details too. And of course, those same things matter in a really big way, for our topic tonight, which is, getting ready to sell a practice, or if you're buying a practice, how to make sure you're doing it intelligently. As most of you know, I am a dental attorney here in the Bay Area. I've had a long relationship with the San Mateo Dental Society. It's been absolutely wonderful on so many different levels. I've gotten to know everyone really very deeply, and I love always coming there live and doing things, even though it's a little bit of a trek from the East Bay, but I always love it for a lot of reasons. One is that you guys are a really small community, you're very tight-knit, and you've always attended our live seminars really well, and so I'm always excited to come back and provide as much detail and as much information as I can for you. You guys kind of hold a special place in my heart. We do specialize in lease negotiations and partnerships and transitions and employment law, of course. And so we're going to talk about a lot of those things. And for those of you that don't know, I started HR for Health a bunch of years ago. Because a lot of our doctors were getting in trouble with HR violations. And so we wanted to provide a solution that helps you get compliant as soon as you can and as quickly as you can with minimal effort. And so we did that, and we're blessed to have been endorsed by the CDA and a lot of organizations nationwide. And so we're really excited to be able to have that. And all of you, have an ability to get special pricing and promotions. And of course, for those of you who are looking to buy here tonight, we created something called the Dental B School, B as in business school, because we wanted to give you as much information as possible through really amazing speakers who talk about all the business topics, how to do a demographic study, how to do due diligence correctly, how to, negotiate a lease, how to find a space, how to buy a practice, all those things that you all have questions about when you're young and you're looking to buy, and you're hoping to find seminars that give you that information, but you have to wait for an event, a large seminar, a large conference or whatnot. And especially now during COVID, we launched this way before COVID, but now with COVID this has become even more important. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to check that out too by the end. This is my family, and for those of you who have known me for many years, you've seen these pictures change and my girls get bigger and bigger, and believe it or not, I've got a high schooler now. She's in 9th grade, and I have to tell you, it's been a wild ride. And so a dad to a girl in high school is not pleasant. but I do have them, and it's incredible that they're all growing. My wife is a pediatric dentist in the East Bay, as most of you know, so I bring a really unique perspective to a lot of the topics we talk about, because it's I live your life, so I bring it with that perspective in mind. It's not just Ali, the lawyer, with thousands and thousands of clients, but it's really as, a spouse, a husband, as someone who's in it, every single day. And so, I've been through a lot with her as she's gone through her practice and her growth and buying and selling and stuff. And so we're going to bring a lot of that to you tonight as well. So let's jump into what tonight is going to be. We're going to talk about. We're going to talk about transitions, the timing, some financial analysis. We're going to talk about legal considerations and what to do pre and post sale, and then how to minimize risk. And a lot of this, there are going to be massive caveats that I'm going to provide you tonight because of COVID. Right? COVID has changed things. And so we're going to talk about that. And some things are the same, but a lot of things have changed. And so if you're buying a practice, it's really important to keep those things in mind. If you're looking to sell a practice, there's very important things to keep in mind as well. So we're going to go through those in detail. But first, before we get there, Jim and Nakia and Mike have asked me to give you a COVID update, and we could spend hours on COVID updates, quite honestly. And so I'm going to go through just a couple of things that are probably the most important things that you need to know right now. There's a lot changing, a lot happening in the next few months. January, there's a slew of stuff that has already passed that we're not going to talk about tonight. But you'll see updates on, especially if you sign up for, our newsletters and things of that nature, if you're not already on them. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out because of these new COVID rules, and unfortunately, they're not really great for business owners. And so there's a lot more things that we have to kind of abide by. So those things are going to come out, but there are things that have already gone through that we do have to deal with right now. So let's talk about those. So the first thing is that there are some essential policies that are now in place that you must have in place. Now, a lot of you, if you're already an HR for Health client, or you've been a client of our law firm and you've talked to us about employment manuals, you probably have these already. But now a lot of these have become mandated. So anti-discrimination laws, new hire checklists, a lot of those things that weren't necessarily present before or were not required are now becoming more and more important, or are absolute requirements. There's a lot of documentation that now is required as well as a result of the PPP funding, as a result of the FFCRA fund laws with regard to emergency sick leave and emergency FMLE leave. You have to keep really good record keeping of time and attendance, people taking time off because they're sick, people taking time off because of COVID, family reasons, all those things, childcare, a lot of important stuff that needs to now be really documented. It's important to know this is different than before. You've heard me talk about it, whether it's here at the San Mateo Dental Society, at CDA, at ADA, at various places. You've heard me talk about documentation. You've heard me say how important it is. Of course, that has not gone away. Just like it's important for you to document what you're doing with your patients in their chart. The employment HR side, it's vital that it be documented correctly. But with COVID, it's raised it at an entire different level. With COVID now, because of the PPP funding and the unemployment funds and all these other things that are in place, it's really crucial that the documentation be clean, because there is entire divisions that have been created by the government to sniff out fraud. Now, I know you're not committing fraud. I know you're trying your best, but they are trying to figure out, are people messing around with their PPP funding? Are they spending it on the things that they should be spending it on? When somebody goes on leave for FFCRA, are they truly on leave for that? And how are they getting paid for that? And so all of these things, provide an opportunity for mishaps. So it's really important that you have those essential policies. And of course, you need to have them in your employment manual. And so make sure you get one from HR for Health. Make sure you have that. It can be, it'll get updated every year, but as we go into 2021, it becomes even more vital because, as I mentioned, massive changes are occurring with regard to laws and leave, especially protected leave, okay? So make sure you have that. With regard to hiring, if you've rehired your employees, or if they were on furlough and you brought them back and you didn't give them some new documents, it may be time to do that. So make sure you've got all of your required hiring documents there. If you don't have those, if you don't have the the 17 or so documents that are required here in California, email me at the end and I will make sure somebody gets you what you need. It's vital that you have that. It's like the first step in compliance. So what's going on with your team now? I want to talk a little bit about this because managing your employees during these times is really crucial, and it is very turbulent and it is very scary. And you probably have been in a position where a couple things are occurring. On one side, you may have employees who are taking advantage of you, and maybe they're calling sick a lot more than they used to. Maybe they're claiming they have COVID or they've been exposed to COVID or something of that nature. And it's putting a lot of stress on the practice. Some of you may be in a position where that's not what's happening in your office, but you do have a lot of anxiety in the office. People are afraid to come to work because they don't feel they're safe, or maybe you don't have enough PPEs or other things of that nature. And so when you add all of that, and then you add the new laws, and then you add health concerns, and then you have all these moving pieces with what's happening locally with the counties, it becomes really hard to manage the team. And so please remember, you're not alone, right? You're not alone. You've got CDA practice support, you've got me, you've got HR for Health. So please reach out. I mean, that's why we're here, is to help you navigate these times. And sometimes it's just a coaching session, right? It's just a matter of like kind of chatting with you about how to handle it so that you don't fall trapped. So remember, you're not alone. It may seem like you are, it may feel like you are because of these crazy times, but you're not, right? You're absolutely not. Your membership at CDA and at the county level gives you a lot of perks, and practice support, TDIC if you've got insurance with them, me at the law firm, or HR for Health, we're here to support you. So please make sure you reach out with questions. You do have to protect your workplace, right? That is a vital part of COVID and these new rules. And so there's a lot of rules regarding traveling, right? Can your employees travel? Can you travel, right? What do you do about social media? If people are posting about COVID and maybe their political beliefs and whether COVID is real or not, all that kind of stuff. Can you request testing from employees? All these things are new rules that you have to think about and abide by right now. And this isn't necessarily a COVID seminar, right? We're going to focus on practice transition, but I'm raising these things because these are the kind of red flags that you need to be aware of. And it's time to reach out if you have questions, because you cannot necessarily limit travel. You can't limit a lawful activity, but you can deny their travel requests. Can you require testing under certain circumstances? Absolutely, you can require testing. Can you ask somebody to stay home if they travel to Mexico? Yes. What about New York? Yes. What about other states? Yes. Maybe, maybe not. It just depends, right? This depends on a number of factors. What if they go to Tahoe? Can you limit them at that point? Those are the kind of things that we need to talk about. Can you demand test results? You can ask for test results. You can't demand them. This is a big error that we see frequently these days. And so you can definitely ask it. If they provide it to you, awesome, wonderful. Most do. If you don't, if they don't want to provide it to you, you can't make them do it. Okay, you can't make them do it. So kind of keep that in mind. When does FFCRA apply? Does it apply to your employees? What if school is open, but they're, the children are being taught at home? Does it apply then? These are the kind of questions that you guys face. And those, by the way, are kind of the vanilla questions. Those are the easy questions. I got a question the other day where, somebody had a caretaker taking care of their kids at home for while she went to work. The employee went to work, and she had somebody at home taking care of the kids while they were doing online school. And the employee came and said, well, my kids are failing online school with this caretaker. I want to be home to help them succeed, right? To help them not fail. And she wanted to be covered under FFCRA, and unfortunately it's not, right? Failing school is not a covered, thing under the FFCRA. You have to fit under their guidelines. And so does it mean that the employee was out of luck and they don't get FFCRA? Technically, yes, but could the office provide it? Maybe, right? So again, we have to kind of talk about those kind of things. So again, really difficult stuff, really difficult. I want to raise it with you because these are the kind of things you face, and so make sure you reach out. This is a great tool for a lot of you. If you can't read that, link at the bottom, go ahead and take a picture of it, or just email it, or we'll email it to you. This is something you can get from the CDA website. It kind of breaks down how leave works. Whether someone has been exposed to COVID at the office, do you have to shut down the office? Do you have to send employees home? Do you have to send patients home? Who do you notify? It's a really wonderful document that they created. I use it every day. Every day I use it with our clients. I send it to so many people. They have it. So if you don't have this, make sure you get your hands on it. Again, I'm happy to send it to anybody. Just email me and I'll make sure you get it, or just go to this link and you can get it yourself. Okay. All right. So with the COVID stuff kind of behind us, I know there's going to be a lot of questions. Let's talk about transitions, and let's talk about kind of what's happened with COVID. So let's go through kind of a normal transition cycle, right? So a normal transition cycle for a practice usually looks like this, right? You've got growth, and then things kind of stay flat for a while, and then sometimes they go down if the doctor is retiring, if the doctor is slowing down, if God forbid there's an injury health-wise or otherwise. But then if it does go up, if the numbers are going up because they're reinvesting in marketing and other things, then that's great. That's wonderful, and that's kind of the world that we live in right now. So these things, these sales occur somewhere in this, right? And so the question now is, how has that changed during COVID, right? How is it? Are more practices going down than going up, right? How has it changed? And here's what I can tell you. Most practices, probably 90% of what we see out there, are right now doing either as good as they were doing pre-COVID, or within 10% or better. Okay, so in other words, they're either within 10% or so of what they were doing pre-COVID or better, and some are just killing it, like absolutely, better than pre-COVID levels. That's like 90% of them, of practices out there. Now, that being said, right, there are large pockets of areas where that's not true, okay? Downtown San Francisco is absolutely one of those really terrible pockets, unfortunately. There are a lot of practices that were doing, above $1 million or, around $1 million, that are now doing a third of that, right? A fourth of that. Some, are absolutely disastrous. I mean, employees at these large institutions have gone home, right? They're not working from their offices anymore. Some of you in San Mateo may be experiencing the same thing. You are around a lot of big businesses, right? Between Oracle and Google and Facebook and all of these other organizations who have satellite offices and have headquarters and have within your vicinity, whether they're right there in San Mateo or not, but they have offices, you might be experiencing some of that as well. And so that has been sort of the reality, I think, of what's happening pre-COVID. Now, what does that do with, what has that done in terms of the sales? Well, March, when everything closed down to about June, everything pretty much died, right? If deals were about to be finalized, they were finalized, but everybody kind of stopped and took a breath. June, July, August, September, and now October has been incredible activity around the sale of offices. An incredible amount of offices are changing hands. And what's happening is that a lot of older dentists who have been in practice for many, many years, some have some issues, health issues, some don't, have decided not to come back, or to come back at a slower capacity than before. And so instead of waiting for their practice numbers to diminish, which would cause their valuations to fall and cause other problems, they are selling their practices. And there are a lot of really great buyers out there who have been waiting for the opportunity to leave their associateships and become entrepreneurs. And so there's a lot of activity. Now, lending has tightened up a little bit. There's no doubt about that. There's a handful of banks who are still doing lending. And when I say lending, there's a lot of banks that will say they are, but some, are doing it, with really aggressive interest rates and really great promotions. And then there are some that say they're lending, but they're lending, 2 percentage points or more above, the other banks. And so they're really not in the game. They just don't want to say they're not in the game. So the good news is that the money is out there and people are lending, and we're doing a lot of activity right now. There's a lot of deals happening. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean you just sign on the dotted line. There are a lot of complexities that need to be kind of managed as you're thinking about buying an office, or if you're thinking about selling an office. And so we're going to go through those right now. So let's talk about some of these things, in terms of what to do. So some of the legal basics are the restricted covenant. Now, a restricted covenant is something that is important for a buyer and it's important for the seller. Basically, with a restricted covenant, the buyer is restricting the seller from practicing within a certain mileage of the office. And you can imagine that this is a reasonable request, considering a lot of money is being paid to purchase the goodwill of the office. And so unlike with an associate, where you can't restrict an employee from competing against you, when it comes to the purchase and sale of a dental practice, you can, as the buyer, restrict the seller from competing against you, and you should. And because it's only fair. And the mileage is usually, anywhere from 10 to 20 miles or so. Sometimes we see it at 5 miles if you're like in downtown San Francisco. Sometimes we see it at 25 miles if you're in Stockton or Tracy. But in the area, in San Mateo, it's going to be in that 10 to 20 mile radius. Now, for most of you who are here tonight, who are selling your practice, if you're truly selling your practice and you don't plan on working anywhere and you're planning on retiring, this shouldn't be something you negotiate. This should be something you let the buyer pick, the mileage, and as long as it's reasonable, you should be fine. Now, if you plan on working, then you can discuss that with the buyer, and either you work within that covenant with the buyer's permission, or you just work outside that covenant. You go to San Jose, or you go to somewhere else where you're outside of it, and so you're not competing with the practice. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you need income to come in while in retirement, you're not ready to kind of fully stop, but you do want to sell your practice. If the practice that you're selling is big enough, then you could potentially strike an agreement with the buyer where you work back maybe a day or two a week, and then the buyer works the other days. A lot of buyers, unless the practice is small, a lot of buyers are absolutely willing to do that. So keep that in mind. Now, the allocation of the purchase price here, this is something that hasn't necessarily changed with COVID. There's a difference between tangible and intangible, taxes. And what we're talking about when we're talking about the allocation of the purchase prices, we're talking about for the IRS, we need to divide the purchase price amongst these two things, right? So tangible assets are assets that you can put your hands on, like equipment, supplies, things of that nature. Intangible are things like, goodwill and the patient list and whatnot, things that are not tangible and amorphous. Now, there's a big difference here in terms of taxes, okay? So buyers want more on tangible assets. They want more of the purchase price to be divided with regard to the tangible, because they get taxed, or they get to have more deductions with that. With intangibles, right, sellers want more of the sale price to be, set aside as intangible, because you get taxed much lower on intangible than tangible. Now, the ratios vary, but usually they're anywhere from 10 to 20% of the sale price, okay, goes towards tangible, and the rest goes towards intangible. Okay, so 80 to 90% of the sale price is intangible, and 10 to 20% is tangible. And that seems pretty fair. Now, if you go more aggressive than that, you try to get closer, you go lower than 10%, we have found that the chance of getting audited increases. And that's the last thing either one of you wants. As a buyer or as a seller, the last thing you want in retirement or as you're starting a new office is to have the IRS come knocking on your door. So try to keep it at least to those minimums. Obviously, you can play along, you can play around with those numbers. It's a negotiation. The CPAs get involved. Usually the lawyers don't get involved. The brokers shouldn't get involved. Usually it's the CPAs kind of chatting about it. But this is very important. My recommendation to most of you buyers is don't negotiate too hard on this. This is a much more impactful thing for the sellers than it is for you. You still will get all of your deductions, whether they're a tangible or intangible asset. Intangibles, it's a little bit slower. It absolutely is slower than tangibles. It takes longer for you to depreciate it, but you still get to do it. Whereas for the seller, they pay a lot more tax if it's intangible, if it's tangible versus intangible. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, with accounts receivables, usually we recommend to our buyers not to buy the seller's account receivables. And so typically what happens is that the buyer will collect the accounts receivables for the seller from anywhere from 90 to 180 days. And the seller will pay the buyer 5% of everything the buyer collects. Those are the usual numbers. Now, sometimes the percentages go higher or the term is lower, things of that nature, but that's usually the percentages that we're talking about. It shouldn't be more than 60 to 90 days. I'm sorry, more than on the low end, and then it shouldn't go further than 180 days. The reality is if a patient hasn't paid for 6 months, they probably aren't going to pay. So kind of keep that in mind. Now, if you really do want to, if you're a seller here and you really want to sell your accounts receivable to the buyer and the buyer agrees, then you do have to discount it because the buyer is taking a risk that they're not going to be able to collect on your money. So there will be, some discount on that, and we can go into those details, when the time is right. But usually there's a pretty significant discount. Okay. All right. So some strategies for sellers. Don't incur any additional debt as you're getting close to selling your practice. If you're a buyer, same thing. Please don't go take on any more debt. So don't open a credit card. Don't go lease a car. Don't do any of those things. I had a partnership. I think it was in November of last year, actually November or December of last year, right before COVID. And these two partners were about to buy an office. Both of them really good financially. The practice was doing well. And one of the partners decided to go lease a Tesla. And that $900 payment threw off the bank's numbers so much that the deal fell apart. And that partner was not able to get the financing needed to move forward with the transaction. And so it just turned into a real mess. And it was just for a simple, $900 a month lease that seemed kind of, kind of like nothing, right? But it was enough to throw off the percentages, and so it makes a difference. It makes a difference. So try not to take on any additional debt as a buyer. Of course, as a seller, do the same. Please try not to take on any additional debt. Okay. All right. The third step is don't ignore HR. So if you're a seller, you have to fire all of your employees when you sell your practice. It's an automatic termination at closing date, on the closing date. And then the buyer has to hire all of them back on, okay? And so if you're the buyer, make sure you're talking to HR for Health, make sure you've got all your documents, make sure you have all of that stuff figured out as you're getting closer and closer to closing, so that you can have an employment manual, you can have all the new hire documents, you can have everything done correctly, so there's no questions. Now, there's obviously a legal compliance component to that that's very important, because I don't want you to get sued, but there's also, right, a cost perspective to that. And the reason is that a lot of sellers, right, have, benefits, have things that they're providing to their teams that you may not provide as the buyer. I'll give you the most common one. The most common one is 401k or profit sharing, those things. Now, those things are not things that a young buyer can usually ever afford when they're buying an office. Almost impossible. So if you don't talk to your team about that, if you don't have an employment manual, you're not doing all the right things, it's hard to later say, oh well, of course I wasn't going to provide it to you. The team may think that they're getting that as well, and so then you start off just on the wrong foot. Now, my recommendation to most of you is, if you can, don't change their comp. If you're a buyer, don't change the employees' comps, because they'll get really upset. And then the second thing is, don't lose, if they have healthcare, keep their healthcare. Their compensation, their salaries, and their healthcare are the two most important things that they care about. They don't care about the 401ks. They don't care about a lot of the other nonsenses, bonus programs. They kind of care a little bit about that. But if a seller has that, you can come up with your own. But the health insurance and their salaries are the two most important things. So make sure you don't ignore those. If you're a seller, also make sure you're doing everything correctly at the time of termination. The worst thing that we see, the silent killer that I see a lot, is that sellers sell their practice, right? They sell their practice, and then they get sued by these employees after they've sold their practice and they're in retirement, okay? Remember, they don't have any loyalty to you anymore, right? They don't have any loyalty to you anymore. They are now working for someone new, and you have retired. And so there's a really good chance they could come after you. And I'd rather kind of nip that in the bud. So just make sure you're handling that well. Now, if you're a buyer and if you're a seller, please keep this in mind. Due diligence is totally normal. By definition, due diligence is doing your homework, right? It's doing your homework when you're a buyer and you're getting into a practice. So sellers, don't be scared if your buyers are asking for information. It's good, and it's good because the more information they have, the less likely it is that the buyer can say you didn't disclose everything to them. So make sure you're an open kimono, right? You're giving them everything that they need, so they can do their analysis with their teams. And of course, don't hide anything. There's three kinds of due diligences that are very, very important, okay? The first one is called financial due diligence. And that's where your CPA as a buyer and your bank works with the seller and the seller's CPA to analyze the tax returns, the profit and loss statements, the balance sheets, all that data, right? They go through all of that to analyze it and see what's going on in the practice. And this is a very important step, and one of the reasons why a dental CPA is crucial, because they will find things that a non-dental CPA may not find, right? Like if your averages, in terms of supplies are off, or there's things that the numbers don't make sense based on the revenue, a good dental CPA will find that out. Then there's the legal due diligence, and that's my part, of course. I look at the purchase agreement, we negotiate the lease, we help you with your employees, we set up your corporation, maybe set up, draft some LOIs if there's no brokers involved or whatnot, but definitely review those. We help everything on the legal side as you're kind of getting going. We kind of quarterback the transaction for you. Now, one of the most important parts that nobody really talks about, we do a lot. We recommend it, which is what I call practice management due diligence, and this is where you hire an experienced dental consultant to help you analyze the practice data. Okay, and this is different than financial due diligence, which is the tax returns and whatnot. A practice management consultant looks at everything else in the office, right? the new patient counts, the softwares that exist, cancellations, pre-appointment of hygiene, all those things that are super important as you're getting into practice ownership. Now, not all dental consultants are created equal, okay? There are some that are really good at helping you, manage, operate your practice. Doesn't mean they're really good at practice transitions, okay? There are some that are really good at practice transitions, but are not necessarily fantastic, when you're getting into practice or about other things or clinically or otherwise. So let us know if you want recommendations to anybody. We can give you some names of people who have successfully done this over and over again. And I'll tell you a little secret. The best consultants, when it comes to this, are the ones that want to prove themselves to you by showing you all the things that are great about the practice that you're buying, and then all the things that could be improved, okay? Because that's really the key. You want to know, how do I improve this office? How do I take it from this to this, right? And because that's where, the profits is, that's where the opportunities exist. And for a lot of you sellers, this is a lot of work, right? This is a lot of work. You got to get your CPAs involved on the financial due diligence. You're going to have to get a lawyer to help you with the legal due diligence, maybe. And then, of course, you have to, open up your office to a lot of this practice management data as well. But I'll tell you, you should absolutely do it. Don't be scared of it. It doesn't mean that the buyer's not serious. Remember, they have signed a confidentiality agreement. All of your data is safe. But what they need to do is they need to get their feet wet with your information so that they feel comfortable buying this. And the more opportunity they see, right? If you don't pre-appoint hygiene correctly, that's an opportunity for a buyer, right? A smart buyer will not get scared of that. A smart buyer looks at that and says, man, if I fix hygiene, I can just increase my production by this much because now I'm pre-appointing, right? Or they do other things, right, that are smart, that allows them to grow the practice. So nobody expects you to run a perfect operation if you're a seller. And in fact, if you don't, right, it might be a good opportunity for a buyer to come in and buy, okay? And remember, these are things that are done after an offer has already been accepted and, things are already done. They're just doing their homework, right? Now, the one thing I will caution everyone is that if you're a seller, right, and you have shared some information with the buyer and the buyer has submitted a letter of intent based on that information, if they find out that that information you provided is not accurate, then they will revise their offer price to you because the information you provided them was inaccurate. And I'll tell you the most common that occurs is where, a seller will say, look, I have, last year I collected, $1 million in revenue, and here's my, here's the data from my practice management software. But then when the tax returns are reviewed, the tax returns show $800,000 of revenue. Okay. Well, what accounts for that discrepancy? Well, some it might be bad data, right? Or it might be that some were cash paying patients that got recorded in the practice management software, but maybe wasn't reported to the IRS. There's a lot of things that can happen there. But I can tell you in those situations, they can only go by, the banks and the buyer will only go by what's in the tax returns, not what the practice management software shows. So just be careful about that as you're kind of doing your planning and you're thinking about your sale, because there are things that if you that need to be documented, but more importantly need to be verified. Okay. All right, your corporations. Now, if you're a buyer, hands down, absolutely, no doubt about it, you must absolutely incorporate yourself when you're buying an office. It's funny, a very old dental CPA firm in the peninsula that's been around for many, many years, used to fight me over this for years. For about like 10 years, they used to tell me, oh no, we don't recommend corporations and this and that. And a few years ago, one of the partners came to me and said, you know what, Ali, we've decided to change our tune. We're not going to fight this anymore. We're going to let our clients, incorporate. We'll do the extra tax return and charge them for it. And although I'm glad that they changed their tune, it was for the wrong reasons, right? It's not because, we want you to pay for an extra tax return. The reason for incorporating really has three main benefits. Okay, three main benefits that you cannot ignore. Okay, first, I don't know why that went. Let me go back. First is that you get limited liability. Okay, you get limited liability. So that means that if God forbid you get sued for anything at all, right, other than malpractice, anything at all, it's covered by your corporation. So they cannot come after your personal assets. They can't come after your house. They can't come after your cars. They can't come after any of that stuff. Okay, it's hugely important, hugely important. The second reason is that there's a ton of tax benefits, okay? Huge tax benefits. You can write things off as a corporation that you cannot write off as a sole proprietor, right? And I will show you all of those things because a lot of CPAs don't, because they don't want to spend the time to show you, unfortunately. But most of our clients save between $7,000 and $12,000 a year just by doing simple self-employment tax games, which is just the way how you pay yourself salary versus bonuses, and then deductions, right? Deductions that you wouldn't get otherwise. Okay, so hugely beneficial, hugely beneficial. And then the third reason, and the most important reason that I'm going to share with you that you won't read about anywhere else, right? Nobody else will tell you about this, but this is the reason why we feel so strongly about a corporation as a buyer, is that if you set up your corporation and then you finalize your loan and all this stuff and you buy the practice under the corporation, that loan that you got from the bank will not appear on your personal credit, not at all. So think about what that means, right? You just bought a practice, got a huge loan, and it's nowhere on your personal credit. So that is a beautiful thing as you start to accumulate revenues and wealth and all that, because what we try to do with a lot of our clients is we want you to have a couple of credit cards, 2 to 3 under your personal name that you pay off every month. We want you to have your mortgage at some point for your home, some student loans that you'll eventually pay off, and that's it, right? I don't want a car under your name. I don't want anything that has a payment or anything else or debt under your name, right? I want it all under the corporation, because all of that stuff that's in the corporation is protected, and more importantly, it is outside of your credit, right? So your credit looks amazing. Your credit looks amazing. You're seen by the world as having a lot of revenue, income coming in, a lot of buying power because you got some credit cards that you pay off every month, and very little other debt. Very little other debt. Your credit score will go through the roof, and more importantly, you'll get the best interest rates on any loan you want. So you want to go buy a house in Tahoe? By the way, don't buy a house in Tahoe right now. Prices are going through the roof. Everybody and their mother is moving out there. but if you want to buy a house in Tahoe, you'll get the best interest rate. You want to buy, a boat, you can get an interest rate. You want to buy whatever, you will get that. But you want to do it intelligently. You want to do it strategically. Okay. And most people won't spend the time to explain this to you, but this is why we do this. This is why we set up the Dental B School, is because we want to teach you all these tricks. So to summarize, this should be the order. If you're a buyer here tonight, should be your order. You should buy a practice first, then buy your home, okay? And then if you can, buy the real estate that your practice is in, okay, if that's possible. But buy your practice and then buy your home. And the reason is I can hide the loan of the practice under the corporation, but I can never hide your home mortgage from the dental bank. So if you buy your house first, that's going to ding you when you go to buy your practice, right? It's going to make it harder. So just remember that detail. Now, if you're a seller here, right? If you're a seller and you have a corporation, great for you. I'm so proud of you for setting that up, because probably when you started your office, corporations weren't as popular as they are today, okay? So great job. So don't be in a rush to close your corporation yet, right? Don't be in a rush. If you sell your practice, make sure you talk to your CPA about it, because there may be advantages to keeping your corporation. If you have other consulting business, if you advise, if you do other things, you can run things still through your corporation. You may have your retirement funds, your your pensions and stuff in there. So there may be advantages to doing that. And so think about that before you get rid of it. Now, some of you may ask, Ali, that sounds great, but what are the costs for a corporation? Well, there's really only two downsides, right, to having a corporation, and they're both financial. You have to pay the state of California about $800 a year for the privilege of being in the state of California. And then you have to pay a CPA to file a tax return for you, which is maybe another $1,000 bucks. So we usually tell our clients to budget about $2K a year, right? $2,000 a year. But remember that money that I was telling you our clients save, all of that is net of these fees. So after you pay these fees, you're still saving all that money in taxes and stuff. So please remember, incorporate. Don't let that become an issue. Okay. Now, if you're selling your practice, please consider an office makeover. If you want to boost, your revenue or your sale price, a simple office makeover will do it. Now, I'm not saying hire an architect and move walls and move plumbing and all of that stuff. That's very, very expensive. Please don't do that. But paint the walls, change the carpet, right? If you have to reupholster the furniture, the dental chairs, whatever, do that. You don't need to get a new x-ray machine if you don't want to. Don't spend capital dollars, but do some simple things. Make the office look really nice. And if you do these simple things, and by the way, there's a lot of people who can help you do it really cheaply and effectively and nice, you can really boost the value of your office. Now, it's not going to boost it, hundreds of thousands of dollars, of course, but what it does is it attracts more buyers to you and attracts better buyers, right? Buyers who are serious, as opposed to people who are trying to, nickel and dime you or buy at the lowest possible, okay? Check the lease, please. If you're a seller, please make sure you check your lease immediately. If you want, I'm happy to look at your lease for you at no charge and kind of give you some thoughts about when it expires and what you should be thinking about. An ideal time to sell your practice is 1 to 2 years before your lease expires, okay? 1 to 2 years before your lease expires. It's great for you as a seller, and it's great for the buyer, right? Hugely beneficial to the buyer because the buyer can go in and really negotiate a good lease with a landlord as well. Now, landlords in the Bay Area, especially San Mateo County, are really tough these days, right? Really, really tough these days because these software companies are buying everything around, and so landlords know that, and so they're kind of tough. But make sure you check your lease. If you're a buyer, please check the CAM charges. If you work with us, of course, we'll go through all this with you to make sure you know all these details. But if you happen to not work with us, a lot of lawyers don't go through this with you, so please ask them about the CAM charges. Those are the common area maintenance charges. Hugely important. Find out what those are. Figure out, is it a full service lease where you just pay rent and nothing else? Or is it a triple net lease, which means you pay rent and you pay your fair share of all the other expenses? If they need to replace the roof, you pay for that. Property taxes, the light bulbs, everything. So make sure you know the difference between those. Also, you have to decide as a buyer, are you going to sign a new lease? Or are you going to just get an extension of the current lease? Hugely different, right? Hugely different. We have leases where we don't negotiate a new lease. No. We go and we just get an extension. And the reason is because the old lease that the seller has is fantastic, right? It has great terms. So we don't want to mess with that, right? And so we just do an extension. This is where you have to be careful because there are some, lease negotiators in the dental world who will, charge you, $10,000, $8,000, and to justify their fee, they'll say, and they'll go after a new lease. They'll always go after a new lease because they want to justify their big fee for you. Well, the reality is that they could be putting you as a buyer in a worse situation, right? Because you're now signing a brand new lease with brand new terms. And as we all know, time goes, leases don't get better, they get more restrictive. And so take a look at that, because if the seller has done a good job with their lease, it might be a good opportunity to save that. Okay, all right. So as we get towards the end, let's talk about the team, okay? So this has become more important than ever, okay? This has become really, really important, more so than ever before. And the reason is because with COVID, there's a lot more things that you have to look out for as a buyer to make sure that the practice you're buying has all the things that you need to be successful. And as a seller, right, you also need to make sure that your team is ready to work with the buyer's team, okay? So my number one recommendation is please don't try to do this yourself, right? If you are a seller, okay, you have options, okay? You could sell it yourself. Highly don't recommend that. Highly, highly recommend against that. You could hire a broker, right? They charge anywhere from 6 to 10%, okay? You could hire a selling consultant. These are not brokers, but they are consultants who help you sell your practice. They charge a monthly fee while they look for a buyer for you and whatnot, and they do a good job, absolutely. So that could be an option. Sometimes it's less expensive than a broker. Sometimes it's more, but they could help you. Or you could try to sell you could sell it to an associate or things of that nature, and that's easy too. But remember, try to find someone to help you, because selling a practice is not easy. Taking pictures and doing all the things you need to do to kind of put it in a good place. If you're a buyer, make sure you do a couple of things to be ready, right? So the first thing is make sure you talk to someone like me who can kind of guide you with the right team members. Now the second thing is, I would say absolutely make sure you have a bank, at least one bank pre-approval with you, because then sellers will take you more seriously if you're already pre-approved. If you have your CPA, it's good. Those are your key: your lawyer, your banker, and a CPA. Okay, so if you have your team there, you're in good shape. Don't try to do it yourself, as it'll come back and haunt you. And the reality is, sellers and brokers won't think you're serious, because the reality is that you're not really serious if you don't have a lawyer helping you, if you're not pre-approved from a bank, if you don't have a CPA who's going to look at the financials. They kind of know what you need to do. So try to look at that. And of course, if you need help, I'm happy to refer you to some really, really good people. But the most important reason is that we really want you to kind of focus on dentistry while you're going through this transition, because it can be really stressful. And the more you guys focus on dentistry, you focus on the clinical side, the things that the better off you will be than focusing on sort of figuring out all the other aspects of it, the legal, the financial, and whatnot. Of course, you have to be involved, but as long as you have good team members helping you, then you'll be in really good shape. And remember, this is a critical time with COVID. A lot of practices are changing hands, right? If you hear anybody say that there's no practice sales occurring, they are not, they don't know the market as it is happening, right? Or they may, just be out of the loop with regard to what's happening. There's a lot of practices changing hands. The better practices are not staying on the market for more than a couple of days. The practices that are not as good are taking a little bit longer, but they're still selling, especially at discounts or whatnot. Okay, so in sum, as we get ready to go, whether you're a buyer or you're a seller, you have your transition team ready. Absolutely, we've talked about who those people are. Again, if you want recommendations, please let me know. I'm happy to do that. Make sure you prepare your financials. If you're a seller, absolutely get your financials in order. Figure out where your tax returns are, your P&Ls and all that. Get the latest and greatest, because the banks are going to ask for that. Right now, what's happening is that most banks are ignoring the 2 months that the offices were closed. And what do I mean by they're ignoring it? There's no way, almost no way, for you to make up 2 months worth of lost revenue in the remaining months of the year, right? Almost no way. So your numbers are going to look less than last year's numbers, most likely. If you're blessed and you're lucky enough to have killed it since you reopened, you might be at the same numbers or slightly higher. But the reality is it's hard to make up those months lost. So what a lot of banks are doing is they're comparing your numbers this year with last year's numbers. So how did you do October of 19, right? How did you do in November of 19 and that kind of thing? And so as long as you're showing stable numbers or slight growth, you should be good. If your numbers are decreasing rapidly, then that could be potentially a little bit of a problem. But again, prepare your financials as a seller. As a buyer, same thing, get it pre-approved. Let me know and I'll introduce you to some banks. Just get pre-approved, have it in your back pocket. And then, once you get, further on in the process, you can talk to multiple banks. Remember, if you're a seller, please check your employee records, make sure you're ready to terminate them. And then as a buyer, please get approved. Okay, now, here's the moment of truth. Here's probably some of the most important things we're going to talk about today is what are you going to do next, right? What are you going to do next? And those of you who, have seen me, present before, this is my favorite time of my presentation because this is where I actually think things happen, right? You've been sitting here and learning from me for the last, hour or so. But the question is, what are you going to do next, right? What are you going to do next? And for those of you who are buyers, you're probably excited to become a business owner. You're excited to be an entrepreneur. You're excited about building wealth for yourself and your family. And you don't know what the next steps are. That's why you're here. And hopefully that has given you some guidance. As a seller, same thing. You're ready to move on. You're ready to do the next chapter of your life. And you've got 20, 30 years ahead of you. How do you get there? How do you do it smartly? Well, here's how, right? Your first step tonight is that you write down what you're going to do. So what I'd like you to do is to write down one thing, just one thing you've learned tonight that you're going to do in the next 7 days, right? So that could be as simple as I'm going to, contact Ali and get the name of a dental bank or of a CPA or I've got a lease in my hand, from a transition that I want to do, and I want you to look at it, whatever it is, right? Then I want you to write down one other thing you're going to do in 14 days, right? You're going to get your financials ready. You're going to start talking to a broker about selling your office. You're going to start preparing yourself for that. You're going to see how much it costs to change your carpet and paint your office. And then finally, a third thing you're going to do in 21 days, right? A third thing you're going to do in 21 days to kind of get going with your goals. If you do these three things, you'll be on your way, right, to either buying an office or selling your office strategically and smartly. And so please don't forget to do that. Now, I've got some things for you guys. If you're a young dentist and you want to learn more about how to buy an office, due diligence, you want to really dig deep and hear from our speakers, please text the word B School to that phone number, the 44222, and you'll be guided towards a way to get access to our B School curriculum, and you'll love it. It's been a hit across the country. We're working with some schools about getting it into their programs as part of their graduating senior programs. You'll really like the depth that it goes into, but more importantly, the firepower it gives you as you are planning to purchase your office. So take advantage of that. You can do it from home. It's COVID safe, and so we're excited to show you about that. And if you want more information, I'm happy to provide it to you. Now, if you're a seller or a buyer, I've got some white papers for you. I've worked hard during COVID to write these papers to help you prepare for your sale, because I know we've gone through a lot of stuff. So if you're a buyer, if you text the word SMC buyer, okay, SMC buyer to that phone number, right, in your text message, you will get my white paper on how to purchase a practice. If you're a seller tonight, if you text the word SMC seller to that same phone number, okay, you will also get a white paper about how to sell your practice, right, with checklists and other things. We have a lot of material. We've tried to kind of give you the most relevant one, but please do that. Take a picture of it. Remember, the way you do it, right, is you go to your text messages, right? You go to your text messages, and in the text messages, at the top of your text messages, you put the number 44222, and then in the body, right, in the actual text message itself, you write down SMC seller. It'll ask you for your email, and then it'll give you everything you need. Of course, I am here to serve you guys, so please email me, call me. If you need anything, if anything I've said tonight you want more information on, please let me know. I'm super, super generous with my time because I want to help you guys kind of move along and get to where you need to be in your career. And if I can help you, buy a practice or sell your practice, I'm more than happy to do so. So please reach out at any point. This is my office information and my email. Okay. All right. So Jim, I don't know. Do you want to open it up for questions, or what should we do next? I don't know if Jim's still there.
If there are any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box. We can answer them for a few minutes with Ollie. If not, we will wrap up the meeting.
I know some of these things are probably a little bit more sensitive as well. So, so I got a question. Do you represent buyers and sellers? Yes, we can represent both buyers or sellers. We typically don't represent both on the same transaction because there are some conflicts that exist there. But we do represent buyers and sellers. Most of our clients are buyers, of course, just because of the nature of the seminars we give. But we'd be happy to work with you if you're a seller as well. So. Any other questions, guys? Oh, good question. Is there a benefit to closing a sale before end of year, or better to wait until New Year's for the sellers? So great question. So it's too bad that you've put yourself down as anonymous. But I will tell you, I can understand why if you're thinking about selling. We don't know what's better. Here's what we do know. If all indications are that if the Democrats win and they get control of the Senate, that there is a high likelihood that taxes will go up next year. Okay, if taxes go up next year, then it will be worse for you to wait until 2021. No doubt about it. No doubt about it, because there's a lot of things that are going to change. As capital gains are going to go up, and the normal tax rate seems like they're going to go up. So you're going to pay more in taxes. If the Republicans stay in power, the understanding is that taxes will not go up. I mean, again, who knows what's going to happen? So then it won't matter. If you are thinking of, if you're worried about that and you're thinking of selling next year, early next year especially, and you can afford to do so, I would say, please do so, right? Do so now, because there's a couple of advantages for you. One is the banks have really, really low interest rates right now for buyers, like really low interest rates. We're talking like the banks that we work with right now are 2.5%, 3%. I mean, incredibly low numbers. I mean, ridiculously low numbers. So if you have a good practice, you want your buyer to pay as little interest as possible to the bank, because it just makes it more manageable for them when they're going to buy your office. So don't delay it if you're going to sell. And you're right about that cusp. I'll be honest. I mean, it's almost November 1st, and it's going to take 30 to 60 days to sell a practice. If you start now. So the sooner you start, the better. We always see a flurry of sales happening by the end of the year. But you got to start. And if you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to walk you through it. What advice do you have for a seller who owns the building? Well, first of all, congratulations for owning your building. I'll tell you, there is, when we talk about wealth building, and this is really geared towards the buyers in the room, when we talk about wealth building, if there's one thing that a lot of the most successful dentists have nationwide, right, is that they own their building, right? They own their building. There are so many tax advantages to it. It makes all the sense in the world. For you you're a seller, here's what I would say is, if you want to sell your building, this is a great time to sell, because again, interest rates are super low. so buyers have more ability to buy a building. If it's a young buyer, they may not be able to buy the building immediately. So you can probably rent it to them for a year or two, and then sell it to them if you so wish. If you don't want to sell it to them immediately, then don't, because it's really great retirement income for you. But you will get better buyers if you sell the practice and also allow them to buy the building sometime in the future. And remember, if you want to defray the cost, the sales tax on the sale of the building, not the sales tax, but the long-term capital gains, you can always transfer it to maybe potentially another building as well. You can talk to your CPA about that, but yeah, that's great. All right, what about selling the practice to a venture capital company? What do you think? So venture capital companies, there's a lot of them out there, and they're very, they kind of come in all shapes and sizes. There are definitely some that are better than others. The ones that are specialty driven are some of them are really good. There's some in the pedo space, in the ortho space, in the endo space that are good. And then there are some that are not so good. On the GP side, it's kind of 50-50, right? There are some that are really terrible. They'll promise you the world, and the results haven't been there, sadly, and a lot of doctors are upset. And then there are some that are really doctor-driven, are really helpful, and they do a good job. So unfortunately, it really depends on who the buyer is. What I will tell you is they will promise you a lot. They will promise you a lot. And it's going to seem and sound really good. But you'll really have to do your homework to make sure that you are in a position where you can actually get the monies that they promise you. See, here's how it works for those of you that don't know. The venture capital firms, they give you a lump sum upfront, maybe 80%, 75% of the value of your practice, and then they keep the rest and they roll it into different structures that they have depending on the venture capital company, and they promise that they're going to pay you a multiple of that in the future, if their businesses grow. And so the key is, what are those specifics, right? Because a lot of times those specifics are so hard to achieve that you actually don't ever reach it. And so you might have gotten 75% of your money as opposed to 100% that you could get from a normal buyer. I think, selling to an individual is always better in certain ways, unless a venture capital firm really blows you away, and they blow you away and it can be verified. And they are out there, but we can definitely walk you through those and chat about it confidentially. So.
Ali, we do have a request to show the B School contact slide again.
Oh, sure, Nikia. Let me go there. Here we go. Here's the B School. If you text the word B School to that number, they will send you, information about it. And these were really good questions, everyone. Any other questions?
Looks like that's it.
All right, everyone. Well, you have my info. I'll put it up again. Here it is. Please reach out if you have any questions at all about anything we've talked about. No strings attached, no cost, no nothing. Just, come chat with me. I'm happy to walk you through anything. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Nikia, thank you. Jim, Mike, thank you all for setting this up. And I hope everyone has a great weekend.